Hi, everybody. My name is Chris. I'm a product manager on our cloud security team. And I'm here today with Michael Capicotto from 2 Sigma, where he's a cloud security architect. And I'm here also with Martin Van Wezel, who's a product manager on Forseti. And I'm excited to talk to you about security and compliance monitoring and how you can do that with Forseti. So if we step back, Forseti's mission is really to help get the security community mobilized around filling gaps for Google Cloud Platform. We do that by creating tools and sharing best practices that everybody on GCP can use. We know that every company has its own way of thinking about security threats and needs. Forseti allows you, as a customer, to build upon the security framework in GCP and really close that gap in the last mile so that you're covered the way that you want to be. Together, we can all be safer. When we move to cloud, it's really a cultural shift. It allows everybody in your organization to move faster. That can make a lot of people nervous because sometimes people make mistakes. What we want to make sure that we can do, and it's the core use case of Forseti, is really to allow your security teams to create guardrails for people as they're doing their development so that if a mistake happens, you can figure out that it happened, talk to somebody, and help get it fixed. Now, the key around this is for the security teams to work closely with the development teams to make sure that they're viewed as an enabler and not as a block. In terms of the core Forseti modules, what we offer are a couple of things. First is inventory. So the inventory module allows you as a customer to get a good snapshot of all of the resources that are running inside of your GCP environment. The first step is visibility. Once you see those different resources that are there, you can then scan those resources using the scanning module and understand if any of them are not configured the way that you would want to, especially from a policy perspective. So you might want to be able to say things like, I don't want anybody from outside of my domain to be a project editor on this particular project. Once that scanning piece finds something, it can then send off a notification either to you via email, to a Slack channel. It can also connect into our Cloud Security Command Center to give you a violation warning there as well. And Michael will show you a little bit more about that later in the demonstration. The third piece that we've got is an enforcement module. And what that does is it says, hey, this person has done something that we think is so bad that not only do we want to alert somebody about it, we're going to roll that back. An example of this is around firewall rules, where you might want to do that if somebody's opened up a firewall to 000, right? You might be able to roll that back right away. And then finally, we have a new module called Explain. And what that does is actually really cool. What it lets you do is answer questions like, who has access, what access to which resources inside of my GCP environment? And that can be a trickier question to answer than you might think when you talk about things like nested groups or the ability to access service accounts. And we'll see a demo of that later on today as well. I thought it'd be interesting to tell you a little bit about how we started this project. Inside of Google, we have a whole team that is dedicated to helping secure Google's use on Google Cloud Platform. And this team had built a set of tools that was really interesting and that we were really looking for help to extend and expand. And we thought that the work that we had done could be a really great catalyst for our customers to build upon. And so as we started to reach outside of Google to see who might be interested in participating with us and helping us build out this set of tooling, we found Spotify. And Spotify was in the midst of their own journey on migrating into GCP. And they were thinking about this sort of same set of problems. How do you set up good guardrails for people so that you let them move fast but get notified when something goes wrong? And so as we started to collaborate together on this, it was almost a year ago that we started working together and announced this collaboration. And today, over the past year, we've grown the number of companies that contribute to and help maintain Forseti, right? And we're really looking for more people to do that. We think that contributing lets you share your expertise and really helps the entire ecosystem get safer across GCP. It's really been an amazing experience to have all of us working together to create a safer environment on GCP. And what I'd really like to do is invite Michael from 2 Sigma to come up and tell us a little bit about his experience doing that and show you a little bit about some of the work that he's done. So please welcome Michael Capicotto.
Thanks, Chris.
All right.
All right, thanks everyone for joining. Hope you all enjoyed your time last night at the party. So let me first introduce Two Sigma. Two Sigma is a New York City-based hedge fund that really uses like the latest technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, distributed computing to drive their investment decisions. To give you an example of kind of the scale that we operate on, today we have over 35 petabytes of data, and we use this to build investment models, and this number is like growing every day. So of course the public cloud is like a very attractive environment to operate in because it gives us the ability to scale up and scale down very rapidly based on whatever kind of computing and storage demands we have. And this is super important from a security perspective because our job is to ensure that all of the code and data that we have, which is obviously very private and sensitive, doesn't leak. And so data exfiltration is kind of the primary concern for the cloud security team. So I'm going to switch over to my laptop for the beginning part of a demo. So everyone cross your fingers and hope the demo goes well today. So I wanted to demonstrate like a couple components of Forseti. We've been using Forseti quite heavily to protect our environment. And what I'm going to show you later is how you can use the explain module of Forseti to kind of unravel why a particular user has a permission that they really shouldn't have. So to kind of make that happen, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you how we've set up some groups. So we've got this group called Security Reviewer, and it has two nested groups inside of it. So you can see here it's got like a cloud security group and an incident response group. And you can imagine these are two separate kind of sub-security teams in the organization. And if we dive into the cloud security group, oh, wrong one. Okay, so my back button does not want to work. What we're going to do is we're going to dive into the cloud security group, and we're going to add an unauthorized user. So kind of the use case that I'm trying to paint here, imagine someone joins your organization. We're going to go ahead and create a new user, someone that just joined today, and we're going to call them very bad user. That way they're easy to identify later on. And they will be very bad user at dev.twosigma.cloud. So I'll create that user. Awesome. Done. And now I'm going to add them to the cloud security group. Now, let's pretend this person is totally not supposed to be part of the cloud security group. They're just getting added by mistake right now. And I'm going to show you how we can use Forseti to kind of detect that they're in the wrong group, and then also understand why they have a certain set of permissions and how we can fix that. So right now, I'm the only person in this group, hopefully, if I've set this up correctly. Awesome. So I'm there. We're going to add very bad user. And then what we're going to do is, what would happen in practice is this user would get added, and Forseti would be taking an inventory every hour or something like that. But obviously, we don't want to wait an hour. So I'm going to pop over here, and I'm just going to tell Forseti to create a new inventory that's now going to include that user. All right, so we'll switch back to the slides now. This is going to take several minutes to run. And so while that's running, I kind of wanted to explain the approach we take to preventing data exfiltration or data leakage. So the first thing that we really like to do in our environments is practice strong defense in depth. What I mean by this is kind of using a layered approach to security. So if you think about your GCP organization, using things like org policies all the way up at the top level to prevent certain things that you don't want to happen across your entire org. So an example of this is, imagine you have a team that builds images that you want to launch VMs from, right? And they harden those images, they build any sort of monitoring and logging components into them that you'd like to have. And now you want to ensure that your entire environment, your entire organization only builds VMs from that image, right? So you can use an org policy to accomplish this. So that's kind of the top level approach. But then you're going to have more specific needs when you dive down into the individual project and folder level, right? So for that, we have individual IAM policies, custom admin roles that we create in the folders and projects. And the reason we use those custom roles is because we really like to scope users and groups to a minimum set of permissions, right? Whatever the smallest amount of permissions they need to do their job is really how we like to handle things. And then if you think about diving down even deeper, things like resource access control lists. So on a BigQuery data set or on a GCS bucket, you can have access control lists at the individual bucket level. And so using this kind of layered approach is very important to us because it means if we make a mistake or something goes wrong in one of those layers, we still have some other layers to fall back on. And of course, we accomplish that by using pretty heavy automation. So our team, the cloud security team, tries to take an automate first approach. So anything that we do in the kind of public cloud, we always try to build through some sort of automation pipeline if we can. I'm going to show you a couple examples of this. So I won't talk about it too much now. And then, of course, we have like the continuous audit piece. So this is important not at the beginning of the environment's inception, but as the environment ages, right? So you have defense in depth is like the overall strategy that you take, and automation is how you deploy the environment. But things are constantly changing in the public cloud, right? There's changes that Google makes to their services. As your users are interacting with resources, they make changes as well. And so you can't be 100% certain that if you set up the environment in a secure way, it's going to stay like that forever. And so you need some sort of system to kind of continuously audit and check your environment and then notify you if something goes wrong. And that's really what we use Forseti and Cloud Security Command Center for. So I wanted to just take a sidestep, and this kind of relates to the demo, but I wanted to show a couple examples of automation that we use at 2 Sigma. Right, so we have users that want to, for example, create a BigQuery data set. And quick show of hands, how many people in the audience know what permission you get on the BigQuery data set ACL if you're the creator of that data set? Oh, I see a couple people from 2 Sigma there raising their hands. That's not fair. Okay, so what happens? When you create a BigQuery data set, you become owner on the ACL. And the effect that that has is it lets you share that data set with anyone, even users outside your organization. So of course, from a security perspective, this is not great, because if you're loading sensitive data into that data set, you don't want that to be shareable with the entire world, right? So what we've done here is we've created a special cloud function. So it's like kind of completely serverless and hands-off from an operational perspective. And what the cloud function does is the user, rather than making a gcloud command to create a BigQuery data set, they make a gcloud command to the cloud function. And what the cloud function does is it goes and creates the BigQuery data set, and it fixes the ACL on the resource so that no one is the owner of it. There's only editors. And then it just returns like a response to the user. So another kind of example along a very similar vein is a use case we came across for developers who want to spin up VMs, and they want to attach a service account to those VMs. So they need to be able to create those service accounts on demand, right? They can't wait for someone from my team to go and create service accounts for them every time they need a new VM. But the problem is a service account is kind of useless unless it has permissions attached to it or a role attached to it. And there's a special permission you need in a project to attach a service account to a role. And when you give someone that permission, they can attach any role to any service account, right? This is, again, not great from a security perspective, because even though they might promise you, hey, we're only going to attach the GCS viewer role, they might go ahead and attach the project owner role or something like that, which is quite a gaping security hole if you let that happen. So again, we've abstracted that away with a cloud function. And what we've done is we just let the user supply the service account name, and the cloud function will actually link the service account to a predefined role. That way the user doesn't have control over that, but they still have the automation in place to deploy it. And this example is kind of what I'm going to demonstrate to you, right? What we're going to do is we're going to show how someone got the ability to do this without using the cloud function, just do it directly, and we're going to uncover how they inherited that permission. So I spoke a little bit about defense in depth and how we use various layers of security in the organization. I also spoke about the automation piece with those 2 cloud functions. And I want to talk now a little bit about how we use Forseti in conjunction with Cloud Security Command Center. Quick show of hands, who knows what Cloud Security Command Center is? Wicked, okay, awesome. So Cloud Security Command Center, for those of you who don't know, is really like a inventory and dashboard in the GCP console, but used strictly for security-related things, right? So you can think of it as like your security landing page. And I'll show you guys what that looks like in a few minutes. But what we do is we have various sources of security information, one of them being Forseti, other ones being like custom code that we write. They could be third-party products like, a firewall or something, or a logging service that you use. And what we do is we bubble up all of those kind of security findings into Cloud Security Command Center. Right. So one of the coolest pieces of Forseti is the scanner component. The scanner component lets you write rules in a very simple YAML format that you want your environment to adhere to. And once those rules are written, you supply them to the Forseti service, and every time it runs an inventory creation and a new model is created, it's also going to check all of your rules to make sure if any of them, to see if any of them have been violated. And if they are, you can get notified, like Chris said, in various ways, right? You can get an email if that's like how you want to do things. You can get a notification on Slack. I know that's being worked on, and also a pub sub notification is being worked on. But the way we do it is we basically create a finding in Cloud Security Command Center so that our incident response team can go and act on that. And these are what the rules look like. So this example here basically shows something that relates to the first example I showed you with the BigQuery data set. So this basically says that only, and I guess I can try to, I can't highlight it, but if you look at the bottom of the screen there, you'll see the service account, proj@appspot.gserviceaccount.com. That is the service account that is tied to the cloud function that we use for automation. And what this rule is saying is make sure that the only entity or the only service account that has a specific role to create BigQuery data sets is that service account used by the cloud function. So it's essentially a whitelist. And if it finds any other user group or service account with that ts.create dataset role, which is a custom role we've created, it will notify us. It will create a finding in Cloud Security Command Center. Another way to approach this, right? Again, defense in depth. We don't like to just put one rule in place and rely heavily on that. So we also check the inverse, right? Rather than checking who has permission to create data sets, we also want to say if anyone ever shows up in the dataset ACL that has an @2sigma.com email address, please notify us of that, because there really shouldn't be anyone in that dataset ACL. And this is very similar to the first one, right? So again, it's a very straightforward thing saying the service account used by the cloud function should be the only thing that can do the binding of service account to admin role, right? So that's another custom role we've created there, ts.bind service account. Oh, yeah, and I wanted to talk a little bit about how that integration actually happens, right? So Forseti Scanner runs, it finds violations to the rules, and now it wants to notify you about them. And to get the violations into Cloud Security Command Center, there was existing integration before we started using the two products. And the way that integration worked is you essentially had a GCS bucket. Forseti would run, it would create a list of violations in a specific format, and it would dump that to GCS. And then Cloud Security Command Center would wake up every so often, and it would read the GCS bucket and create a list of findings based on the violations in the bucket. But we kind of felt that this was a little bit clunky and that it could be better, because Cloud Security Command Center is kind of in alpha right now, and eventually they exposed an API, so you could write findings directly via the API. And I think this is, I really want to give a shout out to like the Forseti team, because we really chose to use Forseti as our main security tool, main security monitoring tool in GCP, because it's open source and because it's so easy to work with. So when we saw this kind of, I don't want to call it a deficiency, but just something that could be improved, we got in touch with Chris and the Forseti team, and we basically said, look, like, can we transform this? And they were like, yeah, for sure. Let's work on it together. So we wrote some very simple code at first, which became a little bit more complex as time went on. And then we just pushed that change into the Forseti 2.0 branch. So now there's direct integration between the two, right? So for those of you who are using Forseti, if you look in your configuration file, which is just a YAML file that you use to set up Forseti, you'll see now that you can set the CSCC integration to either GCS mode or API mode. And if you set it to API mode, then you're going to have that direct integration. And we really did this because we felt it was faster, cleaner, and it gives you a lot more control over the properties that you write into your findings in Cloud Security Command Center, right? So if you have like very specific rules like we do that the scanner is running, you can control exactly what information about each of those rules gets written into the Security Command Center. All right, so I can see that my inventory creation is done here. So let's switch over to the demo. Awesome. So the first thing we're going to do is just make sure that the inventory creation was successful. And we can see here that probably about 12 minutes ago, the inventory creation finished. And so the next step, once you've taken an inventory in Forseti, the next step is to create a model from that inventory. And the model lets you ask questions about all the information you collected in the inventory. So we're going to do Forseti model create. And we're going to specify this inventory, and we're going to call it super duper demo. Hopefully I have not used that word before here, otherwise it will fail. And so this will take about 30 seconds, I think. And essentially what it's doing is it's collecting all of the attributes and the resources that the inventory collected, and it's creating a model. And the model is going to let us ask some really cool questions. So let me kind of paint a picture now. Imagine your incident response team comes in Thursday morning, today's Thursday, and they get this alert. So this is the Cloud Security Command Center dashboard, and I've created this project called Demo. You can see it here as an asset. And imagine your incident response team comes in, and they see this finding here, right? So this is probably not a good thing. It's probably something you want to investigate, right? So if I dive into that finding, it says unauthorized permission detected. It's from 10:01 last night. So it looks like what happened is someone didn't get enough work done this week, and after the Chainsmokers concert, in their cab ride on the way back to their hotel, they tried to do some work. And clearly they made a mistake because now there's unauthorized permission. So we're going to dive into that finding and see what it says. So it says that the source is Forseti, so it means that we're doing our job properly, and Forseti's picked up some information. And we've got details here. It says very bad user at dev.2sigma.cloud was found with elevated permissions. And so the first thing you would probably do as a security practitioner is you would go to that project and you would dive into the IAM console and you would try to find out why that person has those permissions. So let's take a look at that. Right, so this is the demo project. You can see that up here. And the permission we care about is the one that allows you to link a service account to a role. And that permission is contained, I can show you right here, in this project IAM admin role, right? So it's actually this permission right here. It's called resource manager.projects.set IAM policy. It allows you to create that binding. But the interesting thing is that we can see right here the only person in the demo project, or only group in the demo project with that permission, is security reviewer. And so it would be very difficult at this point for someone to kind of investigate, because you can't click this group here and see who's in it, and you can't expand out all the nested groups. It might be pretty trivial for us to do that because I just have a small group, but you can imagine having groups of hundreds or thousands of users. It's very difficult to inspect that. So Forseti is going to make that way easier for us, and I'll show you how. Right, so the model is created, so I'm just going to say Forseti model use super duper demo. Cool. And now we can ask questions about this using the explainer module, right? So I'm going to walk you guys through this before I run it, but basically what it says, let me zoom in so everyone can see that. That's better, right? So essentially what it says is that we want to know why a specific permission was granted. The user is very bad user at dev.2sigma.com, and the resource is the project, that demo project I showed you. And we're asking about a very specific permission, which is the resource manager.projects.set IAM policy. Awesome. Okay, so let me actually zoom out now so we can see what's going on. Cool. So what Forseti has done here is it's used that model we created, and it's unpacked and unrolled and flattened out all of the groups and their subgroups. And so we can see here that very bad user is part of a group called Cloud Security. And Cloud Security has a parent group called Security Reviewer. And it's actually taken things a step further, and it's showing us that Security Reviewer has this role, Project IAM Admin, in the demo project, right? So as opposed to having to go and click through the console and expand all the groups and like kind of scroll through them and search through them, we've used the explain module of Forseti to just very quickly see why a user has a certain permission. Another thing that we could do, I've got like a little script here. We could look at things from a different angle, right? So what we could do is say Forseti explainer access by resource, right? So rather than looking at what permissions a particular user has, we're going to say show me all the permissions for a particular resource, right? So this can be super powerful. And I'm just going to copy the rest of it. This is probably going to run for another 30 seconds, but basically, I think this is really powerful because what it allows you to do is pick a particular resource or a particular user in your environment and say, show me all the permissions that that user has, or show me all the users or groups or service accounts that have access to that resource, right? And this can be very powerful from an investigative perspective. So hopefully this finishes up soon, and I can actually dive into it and show you guys what that looks like. We'll cross our fingers. And I guess those are not the only two things, right? Maybe I'm oversimplifying it here. There's also the inverse to y granted. So you see this y granted here, which is the first one I ran. There's also a y not granted or y blocked, right? So this is really useful for our team because I'm sure of all the security people here, kind of give me a show of hands if this has ever happened to you. You get a team coming to you saying, we need, project owner. And you're like, no, you can't have project owner. You got to have like a minimum set of permissions. So they come up with some minimum set of permissions and you grant it to them. And 30 seconds later, they come back to your desk and they're like, yeah, I can't do what I want to do. I'm blocked, right? How many people has that happened to? Awesome, okay. And that's super painful, that sucks. So this allows you to not go back and forth with them a million times. You can just run a simple command that says, why was this user not allowed to do this, not allowed to make this API call? And Forseti will tell you right away what permission they're missing. All right, so that's done. So we can look at the project permissions now, and you can see like a whole bunch of stuff in here, but really what we're looking for is that, what was it, resource manager. And there are a lot of them in here. Oh, cool, it was the previous one there. Let me just scroll up. So anyway, this is basically a list of bindings in the project, but you can see here the one that we care about, right? So what this has actually done is it said for the project TS dev demo and the role project IAM admin, unpack all of the groups and flatten them and tell me everyone that has that permission. So it's really just another way to look at it. All right, so that concludes the demo. Let's go back to the slides. I think that's all I have, so I'd like to invite Martin van Wezel up on stage, a product manager for Forseti, to talk to you about kind of the future of Forseti. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. That was cool. Hey, everyone. My name is Martin, and I'm a product manager on Forseti. As the last section of today, I would like to talk to you about where we are right now and where we're going in the future. So, as some of you might know, on July 16th, we launched what is called Forseti 2.0. And that was the culmination of a lot of work, a lot of testing, not just by us, but also by a bunch of customers, including Michael's team, on how it worked. And we did a lot of work on listening to our users. I've spoken to many people about what they needed, and we've tried to address what they wanted as much as we could, and it's an ongoing procedure, of course. But 2.0 marks a very nice milestone where we've made things quite easy to install, made things faster, more consistent, and understandable from a code perspective, from a documentation perspective. But I called it a milestone, and that is for a specific reason. We want to, at this point, shift gears and take things in a bit of a slightly different direction. And this new direction that we're thinking about has 3 pillars. We want to provide you, the user, developers, and just security admins, with the tools and the team to build on top of Forseti. So that means that we want you to tell us what you need. We'll help you get there. And we'll also want to collaborate in the entire community on working out which are the best practices in security that we want to think about, and then perhaps encode them into Forseti and check for them. So let me go in a bit of more detail. First of all, like I said, a foundation to build on. So for us, that means that our core team wants to focus a lot on making Forseti even more stable, understandable, rugged, all these kind of good words that enable people like yourself to build on top of this easily. And of course that includes documentation and all kinds of connectivity, connection to external products, PubSub was mentioned, and so forth. Second pillar here is community, and that is really the most important one for us at this point, which is that you are now in focus. We want to extend the way we reach out to you, and we'll speak a little bit about that, but basically extend how you feel that you can talk to us, and also hopefully to other people in that community. And for that reason, what we're going to do is we've been working on things like governance documents, rules of the road, and so forth. And we don't pretend that we know everything there is to know, so we're not going to do this in the this is it, done, deal with it approach. What we want to do and what we will do is probably even do rules as code by just showing you our documentation and going, hey, this is what we thought about. What do you think? And let's modify it. Maybe we'll just put the rules on GitHub. Let's see. And have you guys suggest changes and see if you're cool with it. And the final part is best practices. Now, one thing, I've been speaking to customers a ton, and one thing that kept on coming up is that people said, well, this Forseti, you know, the installation is pretty efficient at this point. But once it's done, still there's a lot of track to cover before you get something useful out of Forseti, before it tells me something that I can do with not too much noise, that I know what to do next and so forth, and that the rules make sense for my architecture. So that's a lot of stuff that we need to cover, and the way we want to do that is not just sort of write things down, but really try to source a bunch of these rules, things that work for you, and you, things that came out of the Google Professional Services Organization, things that came from Google Eng themselves, and try to discuss those rules, collate them, figure out which ones make sense, maybe divide them up into, verticals, like maybe financial people have totally different requirements than people in commerce. So what we want to do is start a discussion, figure out which rules are there, and then start to effectively see, hey, can we encode these in Forseti? Does current Forseti support it? If not, let's start building. And we will help you with that. So as an example of a good best practice that we haven't implemented yet, but we really want to do very badly, is policy as code. And you've heard the words mentioned before, perhaps. But one key thing we want to say there is that we want to move Forseti a little bit forward in your CI/CD chain. And before the architecture is even there, when it's only, let's say, a Terraform plan or something that's sitting in your deployment manager, run Forseti on that and go, hey, do you think this will make sense, or will we have problems later? So that's something that we really want to focus on very soon. So to round this all off, we want to enable the community, and we are, as much as you, part of that community, to make sure that Forseti works for you and enable you to build on top of it. So expand it in every way that makes sense for your future and for your security.